Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another To the Point podcast. Everybody's doing well after a beautiful weekend here in New Brunswick, where we saw, temperatures rise to 40 degrees. I know I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I didn't want to get too far away from the TV because there's a lot of interesting sports on this weekend. I really, I dropped to another level this weekend. I had the Rogers Cup, which I watched a lot. Saturday and Sunday. But there's also this sport called the National Football League, and it's my favorite sport. It's the most compelling thing on TV to me. When NFL season comes on, when college football comes back, which is on September the 5th, I believe. That'll be on Labor Day weekend. I am glued to the television. It is just heaven to me. And I love every second of it. I can't get enough of the NFL. And normally I'm not a big preseason fan. It's not the real thing. But I'm thinking there's a lot of intrigue heading into this NFL season. There's a lot of rookie quarterbacks that I want to see how they look on the field. There's, Deshaun Watson's story. What is he going to play in the preseason? Why hasn't the NFL suspended this guy yet? There's Tim Tebow, who played the second most snaps for the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend. I don't find him compelling whatsoever. I really don't hate many athletes, and I don't hate him per se, but I really dislike him. And I'll touch on that throughout this podcast. But I watched a significant amount of NFL preseason. Started Thursday night where I watched the Patriots, Mac Jones, play the Washington football team. Watched a lot of that game. Then Friday night, I didn't get to watch as much, but I did catch the tail end of the Cowboys-Cardinals game. So watched some of that. And Saturday, I watched a lot of NFL. I watched the Dolphins and Bears. Justin Fields looking very, very calm, very poised in his debut, throwing a touchdown strike, rushing for a touchdown, going 14 for 20. Over 140 yards in his debut in the NFL, and he looked really good and looked like he's going to be the QB1 of the Chicago Bears. At least that's who should be QB1. So I watched that. I watched the Jaguars game Saturday. Some of that Jaguars game Saturday night. Trevor Lawrence, first overall pick, looked good. Looked very calm in the offense, spreading the ball around. They got some interesting targets. They do have a 1,000-yard running back in James Robinson, who needs to be a focal point of the offense. They're working in Travis Etienne, who was also drafted 25th overall, formerly of Clemson, with Trevor Lawrence last year. So they have that connection. And then I also watched the Colts game Sunday afternoon where no Carson Wentz. He may start the season, but he's not playing in the preseason. And I got to see Jacob Eason, second-year quarterback, and Sam Ehlinger really rallied to beat the Carolina Panthers. But I thought Ehlinger, who I really didn't like in college at Texas, I think he was a guy that ran way too often, made poor decisions with the football, would throw a lot of interceptions. And he did throw one in yesterday afternoon's game, but he impressed me. Again, he's playing against second and third stringers, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. But I did think he looked poised, and he looks like a guy that can at least stick on a roster. Guys who are drafted in the 5th round at quarterback, it's not a guarantee you're going to make the team. Jake Fromm stuck around, the formerly of University of Georgia with the Bills last year. With Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, who knows if he will. That's just another guy that you see come through. But it was an interesting weekend. And I'll start off by talking about, let's get the negativity out of the way. Tim Tebow. And Tim Tebow is a polarizing guy. And I'll give him credit. He's so polarizing that he gets everybody to talk about him. I'm sure they talked about him on Undisputed this morning. It's a podcast I listened to. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but on their A block, they were talking about Tim Tebow, this is basically formerly my A block. So in my structure of the podcast here. And you see, Tim Tebow was a great college player. He won 2 national championships. He won a Heisman Trophy. Yet he worked in college, because in college, you don't need to be a great thrower. You can run and win many games. You can scramble to make plays. It's just different. Defenses aren't as set, aren't as prepped as they are in the NFL. Defensive coordinators in the NFL, defensive players have a higher IQ than they do in college. When you finish a university degree, I'd like to think you're smarter than when you walked in. At least I think I am, using my experience. And I equate that to defenses in college where, yeah, defensive coordinators are good, but you can only teach them so much. And the game is so predicated on offense that it's hard for a defense to really beat out really good offenses, especially in college. So Tim Tebow was a great college quarterback coached by Urban Meyer. And he played for the Broncos, and he had that big moment in the playoffs where he threw the strike to Demaryius Thomas. And that play is really talked about being the Tim Tebow play. Yet Demaryius Thomas ran for 80 yards. He had over 50 yards after the catch on that play. So you tell me who had a bigger impact on that throw. Demaryius Thomas. But then, he's out of the league, bounced around Jets, New England, couldn't get to start anywhere else at quarterback because he couldn't play. Seems like a good reason to get out of the league. I've seen guys get released out of the league for way less. I could think of Colin Kaepernick, for instance, Eric Reed, another guy, that really didn't leave because they couldn't play, leave because they wanted to serve a higher purpose. And so Tim Tebow left the NFL because he couldn't play. And he goes and plays baseball. Single A, double A, doesn't do anything, can't play. His biggest highlight from double A baseball was that basically he had a Jose Canseco moment where a home run was hit off his noggin. Couldn't make the catch in the outfield, goes over the wall. That's his highlight. That's the Tim Tebow highlight reel of baseball playing for the Mets organization, is a blooper. That tells you how really productive this guy was. And I'm thinking, well, I liked him. He was a good college football analyst. Again, I don't like him personally, but I thought he was good. College football, he kind of didn't torch anybody. He was kind of anti-me, but he had his own niche. It's on ESPN, Disney, Mickey Mouse. You kind of have to toe the line there. It can't be negative and controversial. So, he did his job very well. But then Urban Meyer leaves Ohio State. Pretty good program. Had his problems there, had hired some people that were pretty questionable, that were under some sexual assault allegations. He leaves because of health reasons. Okay. Take him at face value, even though he had some pressure on him at the Ohio State. And he works for Fox, does a pretty good job. They got a good, Fox does a good job with their college football coverage. And he was good on the panel. But then he gets the opportunity to go coach Jacksonville. And really the main reason why he'd want to go coach the Jacksonville Jaguars is they had the number 1 pick in the draft. And they selected Trevor Lawrence, the next great quarterback, the John Elway, the Peyton Manning, if you will. It was from day one of the college football season, even before day one, it was Trevor Lawrence is going first overall. It didn't matter how Justin Field played. It didn't matter how Trey Lance looked. It didn't matter how Zach Wilson played. Trevor Lawrence was going first overall. And the mechanics, the hair, the flair, and just the great quarterback play, that would make it pretty intriguing for a guy like Urban Meyer, who's developed some really good quarterbacks, including Tim Tebow in college, to say, you know what? I know how to coach college guys. I got an ego. I've never coached in the NFL. What? I should go do this. And more power to him. We've seen it go really well and really bad for college football coaches. Pete Carroll, pretty good. It started not great. He was in the Jets and Patriots, was out of the league for a while, goes back to USC, and then wins a Super Bowl. Should have won 2 in a row if he doesn't throw the ball on the 1 yard line. You look at Nick Saban, the best college football coach of all time, in my opinion. 7 national championships. Couldn't hack it in the NFL. Went to Miami, and it's different because you can't control who you have. In college, you can out-recruit your competitors so that you have the majority of the good players. Alabama does this year over year. You don't have that control in the pros. There's a draft. There's free agency. And you can't say, well, I like Tua Tagovailoa, but I prefer to have Aaron Rodgers. It's just not that easy. And, a guy like Nick Saban, it didn't work. So there's this cloud over Urban Meyer saying, well, can he do what Chip Kelly couldn't do? Or, and the list goes on of college coaches that just should have stayed in college. And, they should have. Steve Spurrier, good example of a guy that was a great college coach, couldn't do it in the NFL. So then Urban Meyer gets a job, and he says, well, Tim Tebow is my neighbor. He's a great athlete. I love him. And he decides to say, Tim, come back, but not as a quarterback, as a tight end. So this is perverse from the beginning because there's a lot of players that work their whole life playing a position to get to the NFL. And Tim Tebow is taking up a roster spot. Now, I can't blame him for doing that because Urban Meyer is giving him the job. But after watching what I saw on Saturday night against the Cleveland Browns, he should be cut. And if I'm on that team, I'm really pissed off if there's opening cuts and there's tight ends gone and that guy is still there. He can't play the position. And if he's sticking around because he's going to be a gadget player, or when they get to the red zone, he's going to run in scores. If I'm Trevor Lawrence, I'm not down with that. This is my show. I was drafted first overall. I'm the guy. And yes, that's a lot of pressure. Don't get me wrong. But when I drive the whole field, 80-yard drive, 12 plays, just for an example, when we get to the 2-yard line, I'm not running to the sideline and letting Tim Tebow come in and get all the glory. Hell no. Because number one, he doesn't deserve it. And number two, this is my team. I'm the quarterback. Tim Tebow he's a nuisance at this point because he can't play. So now I'm thinking, what are they going to do with him? He can't play tight end. He's not a tight end. He's 34 years old trying to play tight end. And maybe Trevor Lawrence has way less of an ego than me. However, I don't think so. You go first overall, you go to Clemson, you're as good as he is. You're not just when you're playing anything in life. I think you play chess. You play the whole game. You have your opponent, his back is against the wall. You're not tagging in your sister to come move the rook to put the guy in checkmate. That's not happening. You're finishing that guy. In Crazy Eights, you slam down your last card when you have it, when you're playing Crazy Eights Countdown, because you won the game. You completed the drive. And for Trevor Lawrence, if it's Gardner Minshew Jr. the third at quarterback, Tim Tebow is not taking my spotlight. And quite frankly, he doesn't deserve it. The only spotlight that Tim Tebow, quite frankly, deserves is the fact that he's not getting vaccinated. He's made that very clear. He's an Anglican Christian, and he's a better person than all of us. Yeah, I said that, not him. But good for him. You know, Tim Tebow can't hack it on an NFL field. Tim Tebow can't hack it on a baseball diamond. So I have two options for Tim Tebow. And I think these are both good options for him. I think he'll like either one. Tim, go home or go to church. Because that seems the only place that you're really making a difference. Because go home to your kid and your wife or go to church and do something there. Because as a professional athlete, you have done nothing. You've been giving chance after chance after chance. And there's a big reason why. And I'll give you a hint. It might have to do with his pigment. It might have a lot to do with his skin color. And the fact that he's religious doesn't go over my head. Because if I was a controversial person, which I sometimes am, if a person was an atheist, would they be given the opportunity that Tim Tebow is when his production does not match, does not warrant another opportunity again and again and again? Like, what's he going to go do next? Go play cricket? Maybe he should try his luck at that. Because in football and in baseball, he has been crap. And in life, you earn what you receive. That's what I grew up. My grandfather, my father, my parents, my family taught me, you don't just get opportunities because you come from status or because your parents have money or anything like. You work for what you want to do. There's a reason I'm not Dan Patrick right now, that I don't have my own show. It's because I need to work at this. I need to get better. I hope to catch a break. I don't just get to go watch NFL games for free and cover sports, 3-hour radio show every day, because I need to go through that process and hopefully I get there. I'm not taking the Tim Tebow route where he goes, "Oh, Urban, please take me on. I'm so irrelevant." This guy can't handle being irrelevant. He can't handle the truth, Rodney Dangerfield would say. And maybe I'm overreacting, but I've hated the guy since day one. And just him when he throws a touchdown, putting down on one knee, praying. And I've seen another guy do it. That was an African-American. Do the same thing. Take a knee for a social justice cause. And he's not in the NFL. Colin Kaepernick went to a Super Bowl. Colin Kaepernick made Pro Bowls. He went to 2 NFC championship games back to back. Tim Tebow did nothing. Done nothing. And yet he continues to get opportunities that Colin Kaepernick, a guy like Eric Reed, multiple-time Pro Bowler, safety, for those same 49ers, doesn't get. So why is that the case? And it's just ridiculous to me. He shouldn't. I'd understand it if he was a decent athlete. He's not. Couldn't play quarterback. He can't play tight end. He can't play outfield. He can't do anything. There's no shame in not being good enough to make the pros. No shame in that. You were a great college quarterback. You won a Heisman Trophy. Not many people can say that. You have that for the rest of your life. And you were a good athlete at the collegiate level. You're a good player at the collegiate level. That doesn't expand to the pros. That didn't expand to the NFL, to Major League Baseball. And it's time for people in positions of power like Urban Meyer to cut this guy, even though he won't, and do the right thing. Because guess what? I'd rather have a winning team, have a better chance at winning, than have some guy on the sideline going down his knee praying to Jesus that we get the first down. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just how I feel. That ridiculous to me that he's playing. But Urban Meyer must know what he's doing. But if I'm on that team and he's playing week 1, he's starting, I can't look at the coach and say he really wants us to win, because I think that's a bunch of malarkey. Because he's putting us in a position where our team is weaker. You know, I'll give you an example just to put us back to hockey. If you're a Leafs fan, would you really be comfortable with your coach if back in the day you saw Jake Gardiner on the penalty kill? Would you think that's a good way to try to win a game? Would you be comfortable if David Ayres started every game for your team for the whole season? I think David Ayers and Tim Tebow are quite similar because neither of them can do it. They might get lucky every now and then, like David Ayers did, like Tim Tebow did against the Steelers. However, game in, game out, you're not meant to be there. And Tim Tebow shouldn't be there. The NFL, like I said, a lot of rookie quarterbacks started. We saw a few injuries. Jordan Love, the second-year quarterback for Green Bay, yet he's basically a rookie because there was no preseason last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this guy is probably the biggest name in the preseason because of the Aaron Rodgers drama. Aaron Rodgers showed up to camp the day of. It was rumored all offseason if he was going to return. Aaron Rodgers was not happy that 2 years ago that the Packers traded up to draft Jordan Love, 24th overall out of Utah State. And it was, last year, Jordan Love did not dress for even one game. And the thought was, well, the Packers bet that he would be ready sooner. And he didn't look good. And, Aaron Rodgers goes on to win an MVP award. So that kind of throws a wrench into the plans of the Packers. But now, to his credit, every rookie quarterback looked pretty good this weekend, in my opinion. And I'll throw Jordan Love in that mix, even though he's a sophomore, because he hasn't played a snap in the NFL and he hasn't dressed for a game in the NFL. He looked confident. He got dinged up pretty good. Came back today, his shoulder has no structural damage, so he should be okay. But this preseason is huge, in my opinion, for Green Bay because they need to see Jordan Love in live reps against opponents that's not the scout team or his teammates. They need to see him in game action. He hasn't played since Utah State. In his last season, it wasn't great for him. He led the FBS in interceptions, and he had lost a lot of good receivers from the year before. Offensive line wasn't that great, but again, he didn't look like a great prospect coming into that draft, yet the Packers saw something and traded up to get him. And now, he was solid in his debut, so I think they should be encouraged by that. Trey Lance, who hasn't played in over a calendar year like Jordan Love, for the 49ers, I don't think after that game I look at it and say, Trey Lance should be quarterback one. He should be the starter come the first game of the season. He was 5 for 14. The most impressive play he had today, he threw an 80-yard touchdown strike, which it showed that he can throw on the run, that he's got a big arm. And what was, the big thing on him coming into the draft was his ability to process information. Kyle Shanahan's a guy who has very expansive playbook, and he wants his quarterbacks to be very smart. They have to be smart to play for him under his system. And he said that's the big reason why they selected Trey 3rd overall. So he went 5 for 14. I think he showed some of why he went 3rd overall. Obviously, his athleticism, his ability to run, and then he's got a big arm as well. Trey is I think he could be a slimmer Josh Allen because he's a great athlete. But, Josh Allen coming into the league, he needed to learn how to throw accurately. And it took him a couple of years to get there. Early on in his career, running the football was really his main priority. I also think, a connection might be Lamar Jackson, where Trey Lance, I think, is already a better thrower than Lamar. Obviously, this is a big season for Lamar Jackson because he's going to have to prove that with a new receiving core, even though Rashad Bateman's now in an injury, with the guys like Hollywood Brown, with Sammy Watkins, with Mark Andrews, who he loves to throw the ball to, with the first round pick Rashad Bateman when he's healthy out of Minnesota. Can you be an accurate thrower? Can you throw in the pocket? Guys like Kyler Murray, guys like Lamar Jackson, these guys come in the league built the same way, where in college, they can scramble for first downs. They do throw a party. They will throw a lot of yards. They can throw on the run. Like I said, guys are much more wide open in college. Defenses break down. Cornerbacks don't hug guys like they do in the NFL. There isn't a Jalen Ramsey who's going to be all over you, where we see DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best wide receivers in football. When he plays D-Hop, it's a war. And he doesn't always win that war because Jalen Ramsey's just a really, really good cornerback. So there's that. And I think for Trey, I look at Kyler, I look at Lamar Jackson and say, this is his is realistic comparison because both these guys are sort of run first. Kyler needs to learn to throw better in the pocket, just be a stationary quarterback, because we saw last year he was injured in about week 10. The rest of the season, Arizona's offense went to crap because he couldn't throw in the pocket accurate enough to be successful. And he couldn't break off in the pocket. He couldn't run. And you might say, well, just let him run. But it takes one hit for you to be injured. For Lamar, for Kyler, if you're out of the pocket, a guy can hit you as hard as they can. If you're in the pocket, they can't hit you below the knees. They can't hit you high. It'll be a flag. But when you're out there, you can get tackled pretty tough. And these guys are tough guys, especially Lamar. But for Trey, learn to throw in the pocket. It's going to take some time because he hasn't played in a long time, but definitely some positives from that. Zach Wilson for the Jets, he really has no competition to be the starting quarterback, drafted second overall. They don't have a veteran quarterback on the roster with much experience. They signed journeyman Josh Johnson last week. But the Jets, it's Zach Wilson or bust. This guy, to me, is heading into a Peyton Manning type season in Indianapolis, where I think he's talented. I think he could have better numbers than Peyton because it's just a different game. But Peyton Manning in his first season, nobody thought this guy was going to be one of the best quarterbacks ever and go to the Hall of Fame. He threw a ton of interceptions. He was not accurate. And it looked like, well, Ryan Leaf was the better pick going to the Chargers. But Peyton eventually figured it out. I look at Wilson, where the Jets don't have a good option, number 2 option, and they're going to start Zach Wilson from week 1. So you don't pull a rookie quarterback. You let him go through those growing pains, especially with the Jets. You've gone through enough quarterbacks. Sam Darnold's gone. You've gone through Mark Sanchez and Christian Hackenberg and Bryce Petty. These guys are gone. They're not. You need to let a rookie, you need to let a quarterback settle in and prove to you that he's either your future at quarterback or he's not, and you're wrong again, and GM gets fired, and they go through this whole process again. But Zach Wilson does have that flair about him. He's got that Patrick Mahomes where he can make some incredible throws, where he's really athletic as well. That's the new breed of quarterback. Baker Mayfield going first overall was really a throwback because Baker can move, but that's not his primary objective. He is a stationary quarterback when he's at his best. When he's throwing on the run, he's okay, but that's not his strength. Mahomes, Jackson, Josh Allen, who's really morphed into that. You see this year, Wilson, he's a guy that can throw and run. He's dual threat. So is Trey Lance. So Trevor Lawrence, again, he can move, but he's kind of a guy that's more stationary, but he's not afraid to move in the pocket. He is athletic. So there's Mac Jones is the outlier. He's more of the Baker Mayfield where he can move, but his preference is to remain in the pocket, be a Tom Brady type statue, and only, his ability to move in the pocket, avoid sacks, using great footwork is more of his weapon than his legs, scrambling for a 15-yard gain on 3rd and 10. But through Wilson, through Trevor Lawrence, I mentioned Justin Fields off the top with the Bears. To me, I think Lawrence will start as a rookie. I think Zach Wilson is an obvious one. He's going to start. Trey Lance, I'm not convinced. I could see Kyle Shanahan going to him in week 1, yet I don't think it's necessarily the right decision. They do have Jimmy Garoppolo there, who is a competent quarterback, who's not a bum by any means in this league. So I think Jimmy will start there. Jordan Love will not be starting in Green Bay, obviously. In New England, who knows? Cam Newton is QB1 for now. I do think the leash is going to be a lot shorter on him. We saw last year how ineffective he was throwing the football. He had 8 touchdown passes the whole season compared to 12 rushing touchdowns. And he needs to be accurate. They got great receivers. They went out and got Kendrick Bourne. They got Hunter Henry. They got Jonnu Smith. They got Nelson Aguilar. So they got some deep threats. They got guys that aren't replacement level. It's not just Gunnar Olszewski and Jacoby Myers and guys who are turned into wide receivers. He had nobody last year. And they got a good plethora of running backs so that their run game can really be the emphasis of this team. But I think they drafted Mac Jones 15th overall for a reason. And it's not like Cam Newton was homegrown in New England. He was drafted by Carolina. He went through his growing pains there. He has ties to New England because he was re-signed, but New England is ready to move on from him whenever, I believe. I don't think Mac Jones will start week 1, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's starting by week 3. And interesting is they play the Buccaneers on Sunday Night Football in week 4. So that's Tom Brady coming back to Gillette. I don't know if they want a rookie quarterback in for that game. I think that would be so compelling if it's Mac Jones in week 4, potentially in his first start with Brady coming back. Don't know if Bill would do that to the kid, but that would be great theater and great television. But a guy who is kind of on the outside looking in when it comes to starting week 1, because Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace in Chicago said, Andy Dalton is QB1. They signed a 1-year, $10 million deal. And then at the draft, they saw Justin Fields falling, the Ohio State quarterback, and they traded up to get him at number 10. They saw a player that they liked, and they pushed their chips to the middle. And this signaled to me, obviously, Andy Dalton is not the guy you want leading your franchise, especially the Bears. They've had so many quarterbacks that just weren't good enough. Nick Foles, Mitch Trubisky, who they traded up 2nd overall to get him, Jay Cutler over the years. Rex Grossman got them to a Super Bowl in 2006. He was a journeyman quarterback. So they haven't had a stud quarterback in a very long time. So you could argue since Jim McMahon in 1985. And now Justin Fields in his first preseason game, and I get it, it's the preseason, but it's the only place I can watch him play pro football. He looked really good to me. And I liked him a lot in college. I think he showed a lot of toughness in that game against Clemson, winning that one, playing in the national championship with bruised ribs. He's got a great arm. He had good receivers in college. And really the big worry for him coming out of college was he threw to a lot of guys. He threw to a lot of open guys. In the NFL, you need to throw guys open. And in college, it's the opposite, where a guy is just got 8 yards of separation and you can throw him an easy ball. But we saw Saturday, he had poise. He did run. He rushed 5 times for 33 yards and a score. So he has that part of his game. And to me, you know what you're going to get with Andy Dalton. You'll be competitive, but you're not going to win anything. And the Bears, you got to look at this and say, okay, yeah, the Packers are the favorite to win this division again. They made it to back-to-back NFC championship games. Aaron Rodgers is back. They got David Bakhtiari, who'll be back. They have a good team, of course. Lions, Jared Goff. Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in Dan Campbell. He might be trying to bite some kneecaps off, but I don't think there'll be much of a threat. Minnesota is interesting. Kirk Cousins, he's a middle of the pack quarterback. He's another Matthew Stafford-esque guy where he's always got good stats. He likes to pad the stats, but he doesn't win anything, even though he's won more playoff games than Matthew Stafford. But they do have Dalvin Cook. Their defense, which was bottom 5 in the league last year, hoped to get better, which they tried to build through the draft. So Minnesota could be a team to make a push. But you look at it and say, well, why can't the Bears be at least the second best team in this division? And I'm not sure. I think they have a much better chance of doing that with Justin Fields. Andy Dalton in Cincinnati was a good quarterback. Made it to 5 playoffs. Went 0-5. But since then, he went to Dallas last year, was the backup to Dak Prescott. Prescott already played the back half of the year. He had some good receivers. The defense was atrocious, but they couldn't win anything. Now he's come to Chicago, and I'd say we know what Andy Dalton is. He's going to make some really good plays. He's going to make some really boneheaded plays where he throws a pick. You're like, what the hell were you seeing there? And I think for Bears fans, for Matt Nagy, and for Ryan Pace especially, this is it. This year, if you don't make the playoffs, if you at least don't have a winning record, you're fired. Because both these guys were here through the Mitchell Trubisky era. Ryan Pace was the GM, traded up to get Mitch Trubisky. And it was a disaster. Mitch was not projected to go 2nd overall. I don't understand why the Bears traded up to take him 2nd overall, where you had Deshaun Watson sitting there, you had Patrick Mahomes sitting there, and you take the quarterback out of North Carolina, who was not on the radar to go even in the top 15 in that draft. Nonetheless, If he's your quarterback, your quarterback. But through his whole time in Chicago, he did have opportunities, but they never seemed like they wanted him. They always tried to replace him. They replaced him. They benched him for Nick Foles. Could you get more a slap in the face than getting benched by Nick Foles? Then they go back to Trubisky last year in a playoff game. He's since moved on to Buffalo, where he's now the backup quarterback, hoping to kind of reinvigorate his career. But they went through that whole mess. And you look at it and say, okay, they drafted Justin Fields. They're letting him take another quarterback. But you're not letting Matt Nagy have Justin Fields 2 seasons if it's a disaster. And if Andy Dalton's the guy this year and it doesn't go well, and say Fields only plays after the team is 3-6, well, it's a lost season already. You're going to rely on Justin Fields to get you back into playoff consideration? I don't think so. And I look at Nagy and Pace. These guys are going to be desperate to keep a job. And Justin Fields gives them a better chance at winning, at being competitive, at making the playoffs than Andy Dalton. I truly believe that. I like him. To me, he's by Zach Wilson. I'm not sold on. Again, he's with the Jets. I worry about that. So he's not there. Trey Lance, I think, can find his game, but who knows if he's going to be successful. Mac Jones, I'd like to think he's good, but his lack of athleticism worries me. And does he have the arm to do it? So far, all we've seen him do is check the ball down. And Tom Brady at least took a shot every once in a while down the field. So jury's still out on him. But we look at drafts. We know that the 5 quarterbacks I just named, likely 2 of them are going to be bust. And you look at the 2018 draft where you got Baker number 1, Sam Darnold number 3, Josh Allen number 7, Josh Rosen number 10, and Lamar Jackson 32. So far, Baker Mayfield, I think he's been pretty good. He's gotten them to the playoffs. He's got a playoff victory under his belt. At the time, he had the most passing touchdowns by a rookie. He's gone through a bunch of head coaches. He looks like he's on the verge of getting the Browns to being a Super Bowl contender. Definitely not a superstar, but not a bust. So we'll take him. He's a starting quarterback in the NFL. So check for the Cleveland Browns. New York Jets at 3. Sam Darnold out of USC. He was the presumptive number 1 overall pick. Browns really shocked some people taking Baker Mayfield. Sam Darnold had a hard time in the Jets. He admitted to seeing ghosts against the Patriots one game. He was benched. He didn't have any little to no success with the New York Jets, and it was a flat out disaster for him. So not a successful tenure with the New York Jets. He's now on to the Carolina Panthers, where he was traded. So at this point, if you're looking at Sam Darnold, he's a bust. Now, I blame that a lot in the Jets because Adam Gase ruins careers. He tried to kill Ryan Tannehill's. He goes on to Tennessee with Arthur Smith. He's now a top 10 to 12 quarterback in the NFL, just getting out of that shadow that is Adam Gase. So Sam Darnold, the book's still out on him, but as of right now, is bust. Maybe Carolina under Matt Rule and Joe Brady, he can find it, but that remains to be seen. Then we get to Josh Allen. First 2 seasons in Buffalo, it was not pretty. A lot of people were worried, saying Josh Allen is not accurate enough. He's got a ton of athleticism. He can run with the full. He's a huge dude, but he's not accurate enough. He's completing 55% of his passes. We're never going to win with him doing that. And Tom Brady was still in the division, and it looked tough for the Buffalo Bills. But to his credit, he got better and better. He's a guy that had no recruits. He had to send videos to schools just to get into Wyoming, where he was not offered a scholarship by anybody. And he battled his way, loses a tough playoff game to Houston where they led big at halftime. Learned that lesson last year, second in MVP voting, second in touchdown passes. He beats the Colts in a playoff game, then was on to beat Lamar Jackson in Baltimore in a playoff game and loses to the Chiefs, and they got demolished. But it was a great season for him. He turns that into a 6-year, $250 million contract, and he looks legit. I think he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. So Josh Allen has been a major hit for the Bills after being searching for their guy really since Jim Kelly, you could argue. So I think Josh Allen's a superstar. Baker, just a solid NFL quarterback at this point. Who has more there? Josh Rosen, drafted by Arizona. Didn't start the season as quarterback his rookie year. Eventually did get into the lineup, and it didn't go well. Arizona they finished last place in the NFL after selecting Josh Rosen 10th. He said before the draft he should have went first. And to this point, he's an afterthought. That year, they get the first overall pick. They fire their coach, Steve Keim, and they replace him with Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff doesn't want to coach Josh Rosen. He wants to coach Kyler Murray, who he saw at Oklahoma. He was coaching at Texas Tech, and he takes Kyler Murray. Josh Rosen's there for a minute, gets flipped to the Dolphins. He's there for a minute, gets cut. Then he's on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers practice roster. Now he's playing for San Francisco in training camp behind Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. Josh Rosen is a bust. He's played, I think, 8 games in the NFL, maybe less. More interceptions than touchdowns. And at this point, I don't see him making the 49ers roster. And he'll be cut again. And unless he's picked up on a practice squad, it wouldn't surprise me if Josh Rosen's out of the NFL in about 2 weeks. So the highly touted guy out of UCLA in that draft, 10th overall, is a flat out bust. That's 2 of the 4. And finally, you have Lamar, who went 32nd. He's had a great career so far. He's won an MVP, has one playoff win under his belt. Hasn't won the big games, losing to the Chiefs a lot, not having the success in the postseason, but he's winning an MVP, still learning to become a better passer. But he's definitely been a success story in Baltimore, but they're still looking for him to take that next step. But I'm just going through that draft here where we're likely going to see just an average guy. And I could see that being Mac Jones. I could see Baker being Mac Jones, just an average to a good starting quarterback. That's how I kind of see it. If you go to the next guy, Sam Darnold, where it doesn't really work out, that could easily be Zach Wilson, because the Jets ruin quarterbacks. Even though Adam Gase is gone, the Jets have Robert Saleh, a different regime. But I worry about Zach Wilson not having a mentor there to really help him. And I could see Zach Wilson being in the same position where he moves on to a different team. We'll see how Sam Darnold does in Carolina. But if he's successful, then maybe that could be Zach Wilson in 4 years down the road. So I could see that, Zach Wilson being that guy. Josh Allen, the success story. I think that's Justin Fields. To me, I could easily be Trevor Lawrence as well, but I know Chicago is a graveyard for quarterbacks, but eventually one has to hit there. And they got Allen Robinson, and Jimmy Graham still got game. They got Cole Kmet, and they got David Montgomery. Decent offensive line. And they got a kid who's got some confidence, who's got some swagger. Who cares? Jay Cutler had all the talent in the world. He just didn't care about football enough. Justin Fields does. And I think that's a huge difference in these two guys. Trevor Lawrence could be the Josh Allen where he gets a huge deal from Jacksonville. That's likely. He's better right now than Justin Fields. However, I do think Justin Fields can put some pressure on him and be the best quarterback in this draft. Baker went 1. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are better than Baker right now. That's just a fact to me, that it's not even a debate, where Baker has the opportunity to win a Super Bowl first, because I look at his roster, but right now he's 3rd in that pecking order when it comes to that draft class, when it comes to quarterbacks, their play, and overall production. So Justin Fields, that could either be Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, being the Josh Allen comparison. Josh Rosen, who knows? But I'm just, in every draft class, there's going to be duds. It happens all the time. And the likelihood Justin Fields and Mac Jones and Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson all being good are slim to none, because that's why every year the NFL draft is so compelling when a team gets the first overall pick and they say, we need a quarterback. The Houston Texans this year have Deshaun Watson on their roster. He doesn't want to play there. He's going through a criminal investigation. Their best case scenario is they have the worst record in the NFL and they draft a quarterback. Maybe it's Spencer Rattler, from Oklahoma. Maybe it's Caden Slovis from USC. We'll see this year in college football. Guys emerge. Joe Burrow was he was projected to be a 6th-round pick before his draft year in 2020. He went 1st overall after having a Heisman Trophy season. Things happen. Zach Wilson was a projected 5th-round pick before the start of last year. He went 2nd overall. Trevor Lawrence was a gimme. But even Trey Lance, he didn't play last year. He goes 3rd overall. It's all a gamble. But I liked all the games from the rookie quarterbacks this weekend, but I even have to tell myself going through this soliloquy with all of you that a lot of these guys are going to fail, because that's just what happens in the NFL. A lot of these guys just aren't going to come through. And it's unfortunate, but it's also just the way of life in the NFL, where guys succeed and others don't. And a lot of time it just has to do with your scenario, your situation, where if you're in New England, you're in a better spot because you got Josh McDaniels, you got Bill Belichick, compared to being with the Jets, where I'm not saying Robert Saleh is not a good coach, but he's a defensive coach, and you don't have a mentor to help you for Zach Wilson, and you got a ton of pressure from New York media because they haven't been successful in a long time. Mark Sanchez was their last quarterback to win a playoff game, and he's most remembered for the butt fumble. So there's just a long lineage of failures in New York, and it can be easy to be pushed into that swamp, into that pit of negativity, and then you're just the next name on that list of discarded quarterbacks. So for the first preseason weekend where we saw every team play, I thought it was interesting stuff. Rookie quarterbacks obviously taking center stage. Some good games as well, even though it's preseason. I found it very interesting. So a good start to the NFL preseason. The next game is Thursday, where the Eagles will play the Patriots. This weekend, it wrapped up the National Bank Open, or the Rogers Cup, as I like to call it. We saw Daniil Medvedev take home the trophy for the men, and Camille Georgie take home the title for the women. Medvedev had made the final of this tournament in 2019, the last time it was held, canceled last year due to COVID. He lost to Rafael Nadal. Later that summer, he lost to Rafael Nadal in the U.S. Open final in a 5-set thriller. But Medvedev redeems himself. He wins it here. And this is really Daniil's time to shine. The hard court is where he plays his best tennis. He lost to Djokovic at the Australian Open this year in the final. And he's not great on clay. He's not great on grass. Hard court, other than Djokovic heading into the U.S. Open, in my opinion, he should be the favorite. I don't know if Nadal is going to play. He's pulled out of Cincinnati, which kicked off today. Roger Federer announced yesterday that he's having yet another knee surgery. He's going to be out many months. And, before I go on to Medvedev, this is like the 4th or 5th knee surgery in the past 6-7 years. This is it for Roger Federer. I've had this talk before on the podcast, but you're one of the best ever. Novak Djokovic will have the most majors at the end of this. Nadal will likely have more than you, but you'll still be the most popular tennis player ever. When it comes to brand, when it comes to sponsors, Novak Djokovic will never defeat Roger Federer when it comes to fan popularity, because Novak doesn't have the personality that people gravitate to. Novak, for lack of a better term, is a dick, and he's opinionated, and he's a walking contradiction. But it doesn't change the fact that he's a great player, but Federer is always full of grace, and he loved the sport, and he loved the fans, and being in center court at Wimbledon and doing everything like that. That was special to him. And he's been great for the sport, but sometimes it's just time to hang him up. And I look at Joe Thornton in a similar position in hockey. Joe Thornton shouldn't have gotten a contract from the Florida Panthers. I don't begrudge him for just accepting it, but I do think you have to, if you're his wife, if you're Joe, even if you're Joe, look in the mirror and say, can I do this anymore? Am I productive? And the answer most nights is no. And for Federer, making a round of 16 at your age, approaching 40, is not what you're doing. You play to win. In tennis, it's an individual sport. And for a guy that's such a great champion, if you don't win, what's the point of playing? And you could say, well, you can't win without trying. Yeah. But I could see if he got to a final recently, even at least got to a quarterfinal recently. But if he gets to the round of 16, he just gets pumped. At Wimbledon, Hubert Hurkacz destroyed him, baggled him in the third set, 6-love, beat him in straight sets. At the French, he had to pull out of the round of 16 after playing a 5-set match. He can't do that durability anymore. And for a guy like him, for a woman like Serena, who are icons of the sport, sometimes it's just time to say, it's time to go. And with him gone, it creates a void. I look at a guy like Medvedev, who for parts of the year will be on top of the mountain, hard court season, beginning in January, then coming back in August, where he will have as good a chance as anybody to dethrone Djokovic. And last year was a missed opportunity for him because Djokovic was ejected from the tournament for hitting the ball woman, and Dominic Thiem ended up capitalizing, beating Sasha Zverev. But I look at Medvedev and say, he's much better on hard court than Dominic Thiem. Dominic Thiem is a clay court player. I'm shocked that he won a major on the hard courts. I'm sure Sasha Zverev is still kicking himself over that loss. But Medvedev reached the final 2019, won Cincinnati last year, where he's going to start competing this week. He's one of the most consistent players on hard court, beating Riley Opeka in the final. 6-4, 6-3, where Opeka had not dropped, he'd only dropped serve twice in the tournament. Medvedev broke him 3 times in the final, just to tell you how good he was. And if it's not Djokovic, I feel confident with him beating anyone. Could be Stefano Tsitsipas, who we saw Saturday afternoon play Riley Opeka. And it was a disaster. Won the first set in a tiebreak, loses the second set tiebreak, breaks his racket. And then the third set, he just lost control, lost his serve. And Opelka has a great serve and has a lot of game too. You know, for Opelka, getting to a final at a Masters 1000 event is a big deal. We saw John Isner get to a semifinal, a fellow American, but an American man has not won a major in tennis since 2003. That was Andy Roddick at the US Open. To me, Opelka has the best chance of doing that right now. And he's not John Isner 2.0, because I think people say that because you look at the size of him and say, well, he's close to 7 feet tall. He's got a big serve. He's got much more to his game. His forehand has a lot more velocity. He can pinpoint. He can hit the lines down the line. He has great serve and volley ability. He's got a drop shot that he incorporates. And I think he's a better mover. He's not as awkward as John Isner. And I'm not saying Opelka should be a favorite at the US Open, but I think we've seen enough from him to say this guy's legit. He had a great tournament where he ran the gauntlet. He had a really tough draw to win. And just to go through it here with all of you, he beat Tsitsipas in the semifinal. He beats Roberto Bautista Agut 6-3, 7-6 in the quarterfinal, who's been to a Grand Slam semi, no slouch. He beats Lloyd Harris, not an easy match. He beats Nick Kyrgios. He beats Grigor Dimitrov, both guys who have been to Grand Slam semis. So this guy is beating big opponents, and getting deep in tournaments as an unseeded player is impressive. I look at him compared to a guy like Felix Auger-Aliassime. I think he's got a much better chance of winning a major in the next 3 years than Felix. Felix is too inconsistent for me. Just to mention Felix, he's playing in Cincinnati today, down 4-2 in the first set, down a break to Martin Fucsovics. This is a good tournament. Cincinnati just following the Rogers Cup in Canada, where these two tournaments are big. Then normally players take next week off, and then starting August 30th is the U.S. Open. And that's obviously, the Mecca, the last major of the season with the Olympics. But, that's a week from Monday. We'll have the U.S. Open starting. It goes from August 30th to September 13th. So I look at a guy like Medvedev. He should be a favorite to do well. And we'll see him this week. Tsitsipas is back in the mix. Some good players are definitely in action this week, no doubt about it. On the women's side of the draw, Camille Georgie wins her first WTA Masters 1000 event, which basically the Masters 1000 are worth more points on tour. They're bigger events, and the Rogers Cup is one of them. And she's 29, winning her first one, ranked 71st in the world. But it was really an impressive showing for her, beating Karolina Pliskova, two-time major finalist in the final, beats Jessica Pegula in the semi. She dispatched Coco Gauff in the quarters. She had an impressive week for sure. Look at her; she beat Kvitova along the way, and she only dropped one set to win the tournament. So Georgie looked impressive. Pliskova, even though she lost, she's had an impressive run here. Made the final at Wimbledon. She's made the final at the U.S. Open 2016. I think she's coming into this tournament playing pretty hot tennis. We'll see her again this week. We'll see Ash Barty be in the field. So some of the women's tennis. Bianca Andreescu will play in Cincinnati following that toe injury she suffered against Ons Jabber at the Rogers Cup. So good to see her back in action, get a win and at least battle in that match. But we'll see what she can do prepping for the U.S. Open. Like I said, that'll start in 2 weeks today. So Rogers Cup was good. I like having these tournaments late in summer because you have primetime matches. Like, for instance, tonight you'll see the men. I think it's Richard Gasquet against Andy Murray tonight in primetime. So interesting matchup for sure. Two of the veterans on tour will do battle. And I like that to see those two get an opportunity to play on primetime. Diego Schwartzman plays today. You got Mackenzie McDonald and Brandon Nakashima, who are both Americans, will also play tonight following the aforementioned Gasquet Murray match on center court. So these tournaments are great because you got matches at night and they're very compelling. And just gearing up for the U.S. Open where you have prime time every night. We'll see fans back at the U.S. Open more than likely. So it's just an exciting time for tennis, and we'll see what makes of it down the stretch here. Some good CFL action over the weekend as well. We saw Mike Riley return to action for the BC Lions, helping them pick up a victory over Calgary. And really the big news in the CFL today was that the Stamps starting quarterback, has the best winning percentage in the history of the CFL, fastest to 60 wins. Bo Levi Mitchell will be out for a period of time with a leg injury. He played Thursday with said leg injury, threw 4 interceptions, was an ugly start for him. And he's going to be out a while. And Stamps, being the youngest team in the CFL, will now turn to Michael O'Connor. He's a former draft pick of the Toronto Argonauts, now at the Stamps. He went to the University of British Columbia, had a successful career there. But it's uncertain. Calgary has not had this level, been 0-2 in a long time. We see two of the blue bloods of the past decade who have dominated the CFL, the Calgary Stampeders and the Hamilton Tiger Cats, both sit at 0-2, and that's just uncommon territory. Hamilton and Calgary have met in Grey Cups. They've both been really great teams. And, we see for Calgary, they lose to the Argonauts, then to the BC Lions, two not exactly killer teams. At least for Hamilton, They lost to Winnipeg, the defending Grey Cup champions, and then Saskatchewan. I think those two are the two best teams in the CFL right now. I look at Winnipeg, Colaros, their whole team is such a well-oiled machine. Their defense is strong with Jackson Jeffcoat getting to the quarterback, and they're just smart. Then in Saskatchewan, Fajardo is just such an efficient guy. He can throw the ball. He can also scramble. He's got a rushing touchdown on Saturday night. He's got a plethora of weapons, including Bradley Linnaeus, who's a rookie who's really emerging as a great player. Ricky Williams-Lambert, you got Picton, and then you also got William Powell, who ran for over 100 yards on Saturday night. So both these teams have strong running attacks. They got good defenses, and they're dispatching opponents. And for Hamilton, you look at Masoli, he's turning the ball over. Brandon Banks does not look the same. He had a fumble, and he also almost had a second fumble in the game where he dropped a kick return. So he's had a tough start to the season. The defense is making bad decisions. So Hamilton's got to work on their game completely. But yeah, it looks like Bo Levi Mitchell will not play Friday. So that's a huge loss. Obviously, they will play Friday against Montreal, who won their opener in really impressive fashion, where Darvin Adams picked up where he left off, throwing the ball over the field. You see them, they get a punt return touchdown. So special team, they had the whole kit and caboodle. Special teams, their defense stepped up with some turnovers. Obviously of Toronto Saturday night. So it was an impressive outing for them. The Red Blacks were on a bye. But looking at like Saskatchewan so far this year, Winnipeg, and I do think Hamilton can turn it around. I have more faith. You have the Argonauts, who already switched quarterbacks, where Bethel Thompson looked great in week 1. They go to Nick Arbuckle. I would go back to McLeod Bethel Thompson this week. They have their home opener against the Blue Bombers on Saturday. Saturday. I think that he's the better option right now, and I think the team would respond well to see him back on the field. But we'll see what they decide to do. But interesting from the Argonauts, they love to change quarterbacks. They love to change up their system, and it looks like they're starting that off right from Jump Street here early in the 2021 campaign. Also over the weekend, we had obviously Major League Baseball. It was a tough weekend for the Blue Jays, losing 2-3 to Seattle. They also lost George Springer to a mild ankle sprain. Sounds like he's going to be okay, but they lose 2-3 to Seattle. Not great. Who were really, they're trying to catch Boston in the wild card race. They had Baltimore this weekend. They sweep the Orioles. No surprise there. And you had Oakland, who had a decent weekend against Texas. They didn't make up any ground, so they sit 4.5 back of the Boston Red Sox in the wild card race. New York is 2.5 back. Seattle 5.5 back. So Seattle kept himself in the race for now. Toronto has the day off today before playing Washington tomorrow and Wednesday afternoon. Then they have the Tigers for a 3-game set this weekend, so an easier schedule for them. This week, the Yankees and Red Sox will be playing. That starts doubleheader tomorrow at Yankee Stadium, 2:00 start, Red Sox, Yankees. And they play Wednesday night, and also they don't play Thursday. So 3 games in the next 2 days for them. So that's an interesting series. You got Baltimore, who's heading to Tampa, who continue to occupy first place. In the National League East, you have the Braves, who continue to find ways to win. And without Marcell Ozuna, without Ronald Acuna Jr., they are tied for first place with the Philadelphia Phillies. Bryce Harper has emerged. They had a tough weekend. The Mets got swept by the Dodgers, so they're in a world of hurt right now. 2.5 back in that divisional race. Everything stayed pretty copacetic this weekend. The only other headline that I can bring up is Fernando Tatis Jr. III returned from injury. And he's now playing right field, formerly a shortstop. He played his first game in right yesterday. They want to try to preserve that shoulder for the rest of the year before seeing if he's going to be their permanent shortstop. But his first game back with the bat, he goes 4 for 5, 3 RBIs, and 2 home runs. This is what Tatis Jr. does, making up for lost time. This guy is such a stud. And I love seeing him do it with the bat, and everything he does on the field is just electric to me. So Tatis is the real deal, Holyfield, and I love everything he brings to the table for the San Diego Padres. There was some NHL news with arbitration deals today, but we can get into that later in the week. Good show today. Wednesday, I hope to do a show with Harrison Shootenbell. I know I've been talking about this for a while with the NBA. We'll see. He's a hard guy to track down, but hopefully Wednesday he will jump on the podcast. Thursday, I can mark this one set in stone. Thursday at 4:30, it's going to be live on Facebook. I'm going to be doing a show with Casey Ward where we break down the Metropolitan Division in the NHL, the offseason signings. We like, dislike, similar to what I did with Rankin, Cole, and Seamus last week. So we'll do that Thursday afternoon, 4:30, live on Facebook. And we'll go through that whole division, talk about some big storylines, what we like, disliked, and go through that whole process. So that should be a ton of fun whenever Casey jumps on. It's always good for a laugh, and it's always entertaining and informative as always. But I'll be back tomorrow with Seamus to talk about Breaking Bad episodes 9 and 10 of season 3. So a lot happening until the point. Enjoy the sports tonight. Enjoy the nice weather while we still have it. And as always, take care and stay safe.